Hey guys and girls, and welcome back to our course on Tableau. In this session, we are going to go over the bread and butter of Tableau, that which is dimensions and measures. Guys and girls, I want you to take some serious notes here and ingrain this concept into your head because this is the very foundation of Tableau and in the way that it functions. So if we understand this, you'll be well on your way to being Tableau kings and queens, making some awesome visualizations for your stakeholders or your business, or really learning Tableau. This is the key concept here, the holy grail, as you will, of Tableau. So let's get right into it. Dimensions and measures in Tableau are the two different types of fields that Tableau interprets when you import your data source. So remember when we looked at our overview video, we saw our data source here, which was our New York room rental listings CSV file. The dimensions are the actual fields, as well as the measures. These are fields as well. But as we can see, Tableau has gone ahead and taken the luxury of organizing them into dimensions and measures. Now, what are the differences? I guess the first thing we can see here is that measures mostly we can see are numerical data types. Now we see some longitude and latitude geographical stuff here, but mostly it looks like they're numerical data types. Now I want you to keep that in mind. Dimensions, on the other hand, we can see are all different types of data types. We can see true and false, we see numerical, we see ABCs. Now, what is the difference between a dimension and a measure? The first thing we're going to talk about is a measure here. Measures in Tableau are the values that are aggregated. What does that mean? That means is that they can be summed, they can be averaged, they can be counted, or they can have minimums or maximums along with other types of calculations. So basically, when you have a calculation in Tableau, you're performing a numerical calculation. That calculation is always performed on measures. Whereas on dimensions, you'd never perform a numerical calculation. Let's take an example of this. You would never really want to find the average of a host name. What does that really mean? You can't really get that information. You'd never really want to multiply IDs with one another. Whereas you might want to count the extra people that are within a listing, or we might want to add up the cleaning fee for a certain area. Other types of numerical calculations on measures include we want to see the total number of price, or we might not want to see the average number of reviews per a certain location, or we want to see the monthly price for a certain location. We also might want to see a location that has the maximum number of nights in case we want to find a location where we want to spend maybe a month or two at a certain location. So if there's an ID listing here that has a maximum night of only 4 and we want to stay somewhere for a week, we obviously cannot stay there. So that is the difference between a measure and a dimension, in that a measure is aggregated and there are calculations performed on them, whereas dimensions are the values that determine the level of detail at which measures are aggregated. Let me go over that again. Dimensions are the values that determine the level of detail, and they are basically what aggregate the measures together. So you can think of them as slicing the measures or creating groups into which the measures fit. Now, SQL is not a requirement for this course, but for those of you who are familiar with SQL, the dimensions are what you would call the group by statement. So what you're doing here is, for our non-SQL folk, we are basically grouping the different types of information into dimensions, and we're using the dimensions to group that data, and we're using measures as the total calculation, or the sum, or the difference, or the total, or the average, and so forth. So let's go ahead and get right into it as far as an example, right? So let's go ahead and first drag our dimension here, and we'll take our ID, and we're going to drag that ID right here into columns. All right, and the first thing we see here, we get a warning: the field being added may contain as many as 47,000 records, a little bit more than that, and 470,000 records, and their recommended maximum for the shelf is 1,000. We're going to go ahead and ignore that. We're going to add all members. So what we're seeing here is that Tableau basically warned us and said, hey, the maximum we recommend is 1,000 columns, but you just added 470,000 columns. And that's totally fine because we're going to be looking at our data and just analyzing it. So we want to see everything here. So we could see that along our columns, we have all of our different IDs, and these are all values for the ID field. And we can see their own columns, so each ID gets its own column, right? Pretty simple. Now, what we want to see is basically, we want to see the number of bedrooms per ID. And the way that we can do that is we take our bedrooms. All right, let's go ahead and find our bedrooms. And we're going to see that as a measure. So this is the actual calculated field that we're going to be using. So let's go ahead and drag bedrooms and drag it into rows. And automatically we can see that Tableau put together this beautiful visualization for us, and it chose that of a bar chart. All right, we left it on automatic here as the mark. So Tableau automatically took the ID on columns and rows on the bedroom's sum, and decided that a bar chart is probably the best way to visualize this information. Now, what we're looking at here is basically the ID columns, and we're seeing the bedrooms as a row. So we're seeing that we have an ID 2515 has 1 bedroom, we have 4484 has 2 bedrooms, we see 8343 which has 3 bedrooms, and so forth. And we can drag along here, we can see there's all different types of counts for the sum of bedrooms. Now let's go ahead and find the answer to our question, right? Let's say you're throwing a party in New York and you want to invite all of your friends. So you're looking for the ID which has the most number of bedrooms, which has the highest sum of bedrooms. That way you can book that location and fit all of your friends. It would suck if you invited 20 friends and you ended up booking 6090, which only has 1 bedroom. That would be a rough party. So let's go ahead and aggregate our data in a way that we can see the most number of bedrooms. The way we're going to do that is by sorting, and we're going to go into sorting in much more detail in its own section, but for this case I'm just giving an example here so we can answer questions of our data. So let's go ahead and sort by ID, and in here we're going to click sort. After the drop down we can click that, and we are going to see a sort ID type of a bubble window here. And what we're seeing is the first option, which is a sort order. Do we want it in ascending or descending? Ascending means from lowest to highest value, and descending means highest to lowest value. So let's see the highest value first. So we'll go ahead and click descending. And the next one here is sort by. Now what this means is, what field do you want to sort your ID by? And in this case, since we're working with the bedrooms, it automatically picked that up. So if we click field here, we can see that Tableau has already selected the bedrooms, and we can see the aggregation is a sum, just like Tableau already did for us up here when we brought in the bedrooms. So we're going to click apply, and we can see that our visualization just went ahead and reflected that. So if we go ahead and click OK here, we could see that we now have a ordered descending of the number of bedrooms per ID. So as we can see on our tooltip, which is a white box next to our mouse, we can see that it's in descending order. We see the bedrooms dropping. Now we wanted to find the answer to our question, which was which ID has the most number of bedrooms, so that I could fit my friends all when we're done partying, right? So let's go ahead and see the very first one here, which is ID 2261367. We can see that it has 14 bedrooms. Wow, that's a lot. And we had, 15 friends, 14 bedrooms. Maybe 1 or 2 of them can share a room, but the rest of them have their own room. Now this might be a house, or it might be an apartment building, or something like that. It's very uncommon for a condominium to have 14 bedrooms, so it's probably not that. So these are the kind of really interesting questions that you can answer of your data in Tableau, and that's what we're seeing here, is a combination of dimensions and measures. Now the reason we built this is to show and illustrate the example of grouping, right? Remember what we said about dimensions, that they are the values that determine the level of detail in which measures are aggregated. So we can see that the level of detail here is the ID, and we are grouping the sum of bedrooms by the ID. So the ID here is the level of detail, and the sum of bedrooms is the value that is being aggregated. So we are summing up the bedrooms by the ID, and that is how we're getting to our 14 bedrooms number for ID 2261367. Now there's tons of other examples we're going to use here as we move along in the course, but this is the concept of a dimension and measure, guys. And don't worry if you don't understand this. I know this is dedicated to dimension and measures, but the more you use the tool, the more you go through our sessions and practice these different concepts, the more this will become apparent. Because I remember when I was brand new to Tableau, this was really vague, and I was like, oh, this is impossibly difficult to understand, and how does this all come together? But I want to give you that level of comfort that we were all new at Tableau at one point, and that you'll be totally fine. I completely promise that. So that is the concept of a dimension, guys. Dimensions are the ones that are grouping the data, and the measures are the actual calculations that are performed, in this case the sum of bedrooms by ID. and that is the concept of a dimension and a measure. So guys, with that being said, I'm going to cut this lecture right here. In the next section, what we're going to go over is the difference between a discrete and a continuous, and that also has to do with dimension and measures, but I feel like that deserves its own section because just to keep things simple here. And the difference between a dimension and a measure is that dimensions are group data and the measures are aggregate data that are being calculated to give a visualization, and a combination of these two is what gave this bar chart right here. Alright guys, if you have any questions or if you feel like you didn't understand something here, go ahead and rewind this video and watch it as many times as possible. Like I said, this is the bread and butter of Tableau, the concept of a dimension and a measure. So if you understand this, that'd be absolutely awesome. And if you don't, feel free to mention your questions in the comment section. I always reach out to my students and see if there's any questions in the comment section, and I will go ahead and answer those and clarify anything. That being said guys, we're going to cut the session right here. I will see you in our next section, which is going to go over discrete versus continuous. Go ahead and play around with these dimension measures and come up with your own questions and really try to analyze this data, and that is what's going to help you understand the concepts of grouping by dimensions and aggregating by measures. Alright guys, I'll see you in the next section. Thanks so much. Happy analyzing.